Hi everyone. I'm here to share with you a concept that's near and dear to my heart called yielding. It's something that I use in my movement practice and apply to my life when I can. I don't always, in other areas of life, as far as how I enter into conversations and how I move through the world in all the ways. So I was introduced to this first in my dance training, and this can be called many different things, but I think a universal term is yielding. We sort of all understand that, to yield into a space. So with dance, we're very much spatially aware, right? I can move my arm behind me and be very aware of how it's moving, especially if I'm moving slow. I'm not skipping any steps, right? My body is able to really understand and learn this pathway because I'm taking my time. I'm not just like going into shapes, right? Which is cool too. But I think our society is so hung up on forward movement and not so much presence and not so much yielding, not so much slowness. We're very quick. So bringing things into balance might be to yield, to slow down. So from a body perspective, we have this sense called proprioception, and it's our sense of where our body is in space, right? I don't have to look at my feet and watch them walk when I'm walking. I know where my feet are when I'm walking. I can look straight ahead, right? So it's this idea that like I have a sense of where my body is in relationship to the space around me because of proprioception, because of sensory nerves. So we have our motor nerves, which is the part of our nervous system that's what we think of with our brain giving messages to our muscles to do certain things. And then we have our sensory nerves, and there's many more of those, and they're more primitive for the human body. And that's really the intelligence of the fascia and the cells within the body, not so much always in the central nervous system. So it's really fascinating to read about it, and fascia is a really incredible organ of the body, a communication system, really. We kind of think of our muscles as moving our body, but really it's more like the movement is happening in the spaces in between the muscles, right? And you can think of the joints as not so much a location, but more like an event, right? Like a verb. Things are happening at the joint spaces. And our fascia, the quality of our fascia, right, depending on how we move our body and what we do in our life, determines the quality of our movement. So say I have an injury, right, and I'm limping and I'm like limiting range of motion in some way, I'm not experiencing that full range. Therefore, there's a disconnect through the sensory nerves. And what is said is that when there's just one misfire of the sensory nerves, that for every one of those, there's like 30 of the motor sensory nerve activations that have to happen. So the motor nerves have to work harder. The central nervous system has to fire up a lot more. So in that way, moving slowly and mindfully, just paying attention to how you're moving, is creating this intelligence in your body. It's just like if you were to go to the gym and work out a certain muscle group, or work with meditation to build that muscle of focus in your mind. It's the same thing for the fascia, right? You're putting a very healthy demand on it to meet the space around it. So if we put this into context with movement, and let's just say a very common example a lot of people might resonate with is just say a yoga pose. So say you're like in a warrior two, and if we're thinking more about the pose, then we might just like go into it, right? And then we might we're thinking about the end result rather than what happens to get into the pose. And so because of that, we might just kind of, a lot of people I see lean forward in that pose, right? Because their eyes are forward, that's where we want to go. And we might collapse, we might collapse in our back or our hips, and we're really pushing out, right? If we enter into the pose a little slowly and kind of enjoy the transitions in between, our body will learn something completely different, right? And our fascia will respond, our muscles will respond as well. But it's a completely different movement, a completely different pose when we yield into it. If we think about how the way that our feet meet the floor, I learned this languaging when I was in embodied flow yoga training, and I really like how they worded it. So they talk about yielding, and they use the example of, are you propping or are you collapsing, right? So oftentimes, if something is difficult, we hold our breath and we tense somewhere, right? That would be propping the body. So working harder against gravity, and that's not strength, right? And then the other version could be collapsing. Say you have some hypermobility and you're just allowing gravity to take over and you're not really meeting the floor or meeting the space around you. Either way, you're not meeting the space, right? If I'm propping, then I'm not meeting the space around me. If I'm collapsing, I'm not meeting the space around me. So finding that happy medium, which is why when I teach, I like to bring in gentle movement. So if I'm bringing someone into, or a class into a warrior two, I'll often say ease into it, take some breaths. Another word I like they use is sponging, right? I'm sponging the floor. I'm moving in and out of the floor. I'm actually thinking about my feet right here. How are my feet connected to the floor, meeting the earth? They're not, my toes aren't gripping, and they're also, I'm not collapsing into like one side of my foot. I'm trying to think of my whole foot meeting the floor. And whatever happens, however the movement spirals up through my body as a result of that is likely my best posture, my best alignment for my body, instead of trying to, hips this way and do this and that. It's like everyone has a different body and center of gravity. So if your foundation can meet the floor with this sense of balance and truly meeting, if you think of a downward facing dog, the way that your hands meet the floor, right? Yes, you want the knuckles of the hands to connect to the floor. You also don't want to push so much. You also don't want to grip, or you don't want to just be lazy through the hands. There's a gentleness to it. And there's all this incredible research around moving softly and slowly and mindfully in terms of mobility and flexibility, forcing yourself into the splits or, some pose that you want to achieve. The body doesn't respond to that. The muscle fibers, it won't be a sustainable long-term flexibility or a safe way to be flexible because the body doesn't respond to that. The best way is to move in slow, meet the body where it's at, breathe, be with it, and then without trying, the flexibility will likely start to happen because you've, just like with anything in life, right? When we work with people in conversations, like meeting them where they're at, there's this sense of holding space and there's a sense of trust and this universal intelligence that takes over. Nothing in life responds to force in a positive or healthy way. So yielding. And so this is something that, when I'm working with in my movement practice and I'm more conscious of it, it really does make an impact on my life, how I come to my laptop to do my work, how I make transitions in between things, in between tasks, how I recognize when I may be starting to over-focus or hone in on something and try to rest my body into the space behind me, right? There's support. The air and the space is holding me just as much as gravity below me is supporting me, and trusting that support. Another example might be breathing, right? So either breathing like up here with the chest up, or collapsing, right? Here's the propping, here's the collapsing. But just kind of breathing in one area of the body or kind of shallow is not meeting the space. So I often invite people to breathe into their back, and there's so many other benefits to that as well. But that's also yielding the back body into the space behind, right? So I'm not just breathing out here and like having no movement here. I'm allowing my body to have a 360 full experience. So anyway, that's the best way I think today that I can describe yielding. And I invite you to try it when you're in any kind of movement practice. Are you forcing something to happen? Are you collapsing into something? Are you holding your breath, right? If you breathe, you are more likely to find that sense of connection to the earth, to the space around you, to your back body, so that your body can find this sense of equilibrium. It will feel so much better, and will help you move in a more efficient way and will actually help you build healthy strength. So I hope that's helpful, and I would love to hear your thoughts. Yielding is such a cool concept. Have a great day, guys.